Hi everyone. So today is going to be one of my ramble videos where I have too much to talk about and I just have a stack of books with some other material, and I'll just use that material as a jumping off point for thoughts. So this is one of my least structured possible videos, which is totally fine. So I thought we would start with a bang. Why not? I recently went to a local neighborhood market in an old high school in the oldest neighborhood in Austin, and I picked up this. All my homies fucking hate AI. No one even asked for this shit. Defend the real world against the billionaires' techno-fascist dystopia. And yeah, I was thrilled to see this. And then you'll notice that the gray lines that you see is further information. AI is not your friend. I'll just read part of it. Atlantic 5925. Generative AI searches use 10 times more electricity than standard keyword searches. Performing 250 million AI queries, about half the number of searches that Google processes each hour, consumes 750,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, enough to power over 26,000 average US households, and 1.1 million gallons of water, Government Accountability Office report. So on and so on. I just read the first two lines and it goes on for the whole page. These were handed out for free, I was happy to find. And yeah, that pretty much summarizes my thoughts on AI too. As a teacher, I think, as a teacher of English in the upper levels of high school English, I think I have a particular angle on AI that maybe the average person wouldn't really care too much about or wouldn't ever encounter. And the short version of how I feel about it, I had a student ask me, well, how do you see GPT, so on and so on? And I personally never use it. I was interested in, GPT in 2020. I was keeping up with it and tinkered with it a little bit, was looking into its uses. And I just found that for my uses, it's totally ineffective for what, I cared to even try to use it for. I was trying to correct it too much, fix it too much, and I never want it to write for me. I never want it to think for me. And so I found it just made me dumber. And so, yeah, I never use it. I never use it. And what I've noticed with my students, the short version is, my students are using it to replace their thinking and to replace their writing, therefore keeping my students dumber and less able to communicate in a written form, which is obviously detrimental, and I can imagine an argument to be made, well, education needs to develop ways that are not replaceable by AI that can develop students' thinking and written communication abilities to communicate with other human beings. And you might say, sure, yes, it's up to schools to make those changes. Underfunded, under-resourced, undereducated schools and teachers. But you could also say, on the other hand, it's up to trillion-dollar, billion-dollar AI companies to manage their own technology where they're not making the next generation of humans dumber and less able to communicate, And I will direct your attention back to, no one even asked for this shit. And so, yeah, that's my short version of my thoughts on AI. I also picked up another one from this guy, swimming upstream, I maintain against the grain. And yeah, thrilled to pick those up. Definitely up my alley, those two. Yeah, thrilled with that. The other stuff was, some booksellers were there and clothing and stuff was there, but that's all I picked up at the local market. Let's see, where am I going to go next? This is going to be totally out of order. Like, between one to the next, there's no inherent cohesion to it. All right, so I'm on summer break currently. And, I was horrified to find that I was taken off of teaching world literature. Obviously, I think my school made a horrible choice because I'm highly qualified to teach it. But as I was leaving the campus this year, I thought, you know what, I'm going to print out some reading material for myself, because there's a scholar that I found who is really like the ideal kind of scholar, like the height of scholarship in my mind that I found. But he has, basically no books that you can find. There's no popular books at all. And then he only has one scholarly book published by the Harvard Yenching Institute press. What would you say? Yeah, I mean, they had like a press series back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe, yeah, into the 60s as well. But it's really hard to get a hold of. But what I could get access to are his materials on JSTOR. And so I'll just share with you a handful. So, yeah, let's go in chronological order. That's how I have this arranged. So in June of 1950, Achilles Fang is the scholar's name, published in the Harvard Journal of Asiatic Studies, the Bookman's Decalogue. So as you can see, I printed it out. And the Bookman's Decalogue is a kind of an essay on being a book collector and being a reader from the Qing Dynasty. And haven't read this one yet, but I'm just so fascinated with, what would someone in the Qing Dynasty say about being being a deep reader, being a book person? Because of course, scholarship in Chinese culture is highly valued. I think it used to be more than it is now, but nonetheless, still now it's highly valued. And to pair with that, in June of 1951, in the same journal, he published Bookman's Manual, which is a manual that came before the Bookman's Decalogue, total translation of this manual. I've skimmed this one more, and it's really enjoyable to read. And I'll go back to these in a bit. Rhyme Prose on Literature, The Wen Fu of Lu Qi, and that's from that would be the Three Kingdoms period, 261 to 303, and that is December 1951. And then the last article I printed is from the Monumenta Syrica, 1997, which is the in memoriam for Achilles Fang after he passed away. He lived, let me make sure I get the dates right, 1910 to 1995. So I just had a smidgen of time where I was alive and he was alive, which I'm grateful for. But yeah, just some details about Achilles Fang. He's a fascinating figure. So he was born in Korea, occupied Korea, with Chinese antecedents. He received a home education, went to university, translated and wrote in German, was quickly found to be one of the most adept Chinese scholars of German, And then he was invited, through a convoluted series of circumstances, to come to Harvard to work on the Harvard English, the Yenqing Chinese English dictionary that Harvard was working on. And shortly after, I think months to years after, he was fired. Now, why was he fired from working on this? He was one of the top scholars in the United States at the time. Well, he was fired because he was including, as it says here, Achilles was well qualified for the dictionary work in every way but temperamentally. And to relieve the tedium of the job, he resorted to adding a literary dimension to the entries he compiled, using apt quotations from Finnegan's Wake. Haveth childers everywhere, for example, introduced the multifarious proliferation of the graph tsu, later published as a sample fascicle but without the enlivening headings. His boredom with the dictionary was relieved when he enrolled as a graduate candidate in comparative literature. And he then worked on finding all of the classical references in Ezra Pound's cantos. And he decided not to publish it because he felt that it would embarrass Ezra Pound too much, because he found numerous, expansive errors in Ezra Pound's quotations of the classics. And he was a famous book collector. So in Beijing, he collected from the Liu Li Chang, which is apparently a famous, book lane in Beijing. But then also, he lived in Boston, so he was very well known to Boston antiquarian dealers. His interests were Catholic or expansive. Latin and Greek literature, 2 complete sets of the Loeb classics, acquired 1 title at a time, all used or damaged remainders. A complete patrology in Latin, works on philosophy and literature, and he pursued congenial writers relentlessly. Everything by George Saintsbury, a concurrent love of mine, all of Virginia Woolf in first editions, and everything in print by or about Pound and Joyce. And here's a picture of Achilles Fang. I plan on making a more in-depth video about him later, but yeah, I consider it an honor to have been alive at the same time as him. Achilles Fang. Let's see. Next, totally different than that, I have a heavy set to show. So this is one of my new books I bought. Not bought, I traded for. Now, I traded a rare book for this. I won't mention which one it is, but it's a book that's worth hundreds of dollars, because the book or the set I wanted was worth hundreds of dollars. I didn't want to spend the money just straight up for it. That's one of the things I've been doing, where for a while, and still, if I run across, a second printing of the Confederacy of Dunces for $11 like I have in the past, sure, I'll buy it and sell it. I'll buy it and then resell it. Or first edition of True Grit, for example. But over the last few years, let's say 5 to 6 years, I have collected a handful of rare first editions, signed first editions, but mostly modern firsts and signed copies and association and presentation copies. But really, through my ecological thinking, I've been less and less interested in that. So I'm in the process, and I'm deep in the process of trading them out or selling them and using the trade credit or the money to buy things I am more interested in, and in all likelihood will be more interested in for the rest of my life. Now, this is one of them. So I traded one of my rare books for the following. Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Arabic English Lexicon, published by the Islamic Text Society out of Cambridge, England, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Cambridge, England. And this was done by E.W. Lane. I think he started the process in the 1840s, and then he died in the late 1870s, and then his nephew, I think, worked on finishing it for him. And then I think all 8 volumes that he finished were published by the 1890s. So, basically 50 years in progress. And the reason why I was interested in it is mainly for 2 reasons. So the first reason was I realized I had, over the years, collected, 6 volumes of bilingual English and classical Arabic literature. And that ranges from, the earliest I have is the Quran in the Penguin Classics edition by Dawood, and it's a bilingual edition. And then I also have, what else? I have the Poems of Al-Mutanabi by A.J. Arbery, the translator. I have, what else? I now have Ibn Arabi, which is one I didn't have. A handful of others. I'm not going to spend time thinking about all of them, but I think I have 6. And there are others that I definitely want. And in addition to that, I've developed an interest in, let's say, traditional scholarship of the classical languages and literatures of the world. So that would include things like Latin, the language and literatures, Sanskrit, classical Chinese, traditional Chinese, Greek, of course, but Greek is not what I'm super interested in right now. Persian also falls into that. But really my top 4 would be Latin, Arabic, Sanskrit, and traditional Chinese. And then the materials don't seem to be as good, but also Mayan. Those would be the top 5. And then secondarily to that would be Persian and Greek. Now, am I going to learn all these languages? In all likelihood, no. But I do at least want to have materials on the history of the languages, anthologies, a handful of texts, definitely the major texts of each tradition, because I just want to fill in my knowledge of the literature of humanity, just the historical literature of humanity as a whole. It's just one of my fascinations. And so this dictionary is perfect for those 2 reasons. I also just have a love of scholarship, and this dictionary is that. It's a deeply scholarly work. It's not perfect, nothing is, but none of the people who have critiqued this dictionary have made a better one. That's one of the things I noticed. So I'm very happy with it. And who knows, maybe down the line I will pick up some classical Arabic and I'll be able to read the text with this dictionary as a help. That would be excellent. I also looked into Lisan al-Arab, this dictionary from 1290, and then a subsequent dictionary. I can't remember the title or the author well enough to say it, but it's a dictionary from the 1700s by this polymath who, it's, I think, currently the longest dictionary of the Arabic language. And just for fun, because, I've been working on my ability to write Chinese, which is substantially difficult because of the character format. It's not an alphabet that I'm used to. I just worked on for about an hour writing some Arabic. I worked on the alphabet, and then I worked on the diacritics towards the bottom. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I found a YouTube video that just showed each letter. It gave a pronunciation. I methodically went through that, tried to mimic the calligraphy, the cursive, and then I wrote the diacritics from a Wikipedia page, and then yeah, I just repeated it 4 or 5 times, and it was really fun. I picked up some of them. Yeah, it was really enjoyable. But then I ran into trouble because I got my edition of Al-Mutanabi out, and I realized I still couldn't read anything because what I didn't fully appreciate is that even as text, as apart from script, handwritten script and then printed text, that the text is cursive and the letters obviously are combined whenever they're printed, but they're combined in predictable ways, but not as predictably as, like let's say, Roman script, Latinate script that we have for English or Spanish, or, even something like Cyrillic, with Greek or Russian. Those are you just immediately you identify it and it's not combined, so it doesn't alter the shape of the letter, which Arabic does. So it adds another layer of complexity to figuring out the patterns and being able to read it out loud, which really was my main goal. I just want to hear Al-Mutanabi read out loud, or Ibn Arabi, which is a figure that I'm getting interested in lately. But it was fun. It was fun. So I think I'm going to keep that up. In addition to enjoying reading through this Arabic dictionary. All right. Let's see. Another piece here is I read through this the other day. Desert Tracing: 6 Classic Arabian Odes, and that is translated by Michael Sells. Translated and introduced by Michael Sells, and this is the Wesleyan University Press. They have a series of translated poetry, and this is one of them. I think this is the only one that I have out of all those. There are a couple others that I'm interested in, but this was a quick read. Now, funnily enough, I rewatched Dune Part 1 and 2. Now it's light watching, certainly, but I think really the worst part about Dune is that Frank Herbert copies real life, and real life is, of course, but notably way more fascinating than Dune is. And I think, in my opinion, I would say, from what I've read, the movies are better than the books, at least for getting that across. The writing style of the book that I've read is, I can't stand it. I would call it atrocious. It's like pulp, written like pulp, and I just can't stand that, at least for the way that's done. So after I watched those, because I stumbled across the other day that Lisan al-Gaib is what Hafez is referred to as. The voice from beyond, or the tongue from the unforeseen or beyond, this kind of thing. And I was like, wow, that's really disappointing. He just copied that. I would have rather have learned about Hafez, and then with the blue-eyed people, that's copied off the Tuareg who use blue dye, and then their skin gets dyed blue, or their face, because of the blue dye they use. And again, I'd rather learn about the Tuareg people than Dune. So I thought, well, let's do that then. Let's do that. So I picked up this, and what this is the Mu'allaqat. Now, I don't know how closely I said that correctly, but that's how it's spelled in the English version. And these are the pre-Islamic, like the remnants of the pre-Islamic poetry that was preserved after, Muhammad and the Quran became the core of the Arabic language. And these are fascinating. And as I was reading these, I couldn't help but connect them to the the ruins and the journeying of Anglo-Saxon literature. And I think there are some interesting overlaps that I think I'll make an in-depth video of later. But yeah, all I can say is I would strongly recommend picking this up, Desert Tracings. And Michael Sells has just a really insightful way of talking about this poetry. He has a poetic way of describing it, which I really appreciate. It's not a dry academic kind of interpretation or coverage of this. So that's all I can say right now, but like I said, I do plan on making a more in-depth video regarding this, at least on its own, but if not on its own only, connecting it with Anglo-Saxon poetry. All right, I just have a couple more. Another kind of a teaser, I guess you could say, of a book or a video I plan on making soon. I'm still working on my thoughts of this book here, Aliocha, Coll, Attila. So thanks to Andre, I've had access to the Spanish version for years at this point, and honestly, I'd been reading it pretty consistently for those years with minimal progress. It's a hard book. I've run it by native speakers of Spanish, and they have a hard time making anything out of it. So I was thrilled when the translation came out by Katie Whittemore, published by Open Letter. And again, I plan on making an in-depth video about this. If anything, it'd probably be like an hour long, I would guess. At least, probably an hour long. But I think I had an interesting experience with this, because I was in the hospital for an emergency reason, in a mortal condition, where ostensibly, I could have died. I might have needed a life-saving surgery. Luckily, I made it out without one this time. But I was in like severe pain, felt like torture, truly. And I was reading this book in that condition. And that seems to have been the condition that Aliocha Coll himself was in when he was writing it. And I can only imagine, I hope, that not many people have read this book in that condition. And it was interesting. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was interesting. And in addition to that, I'm just going to read one passage from the book and then give a hint at maybe some of what I'll cover. So this is from page 87 of the translation, if you want to look at it. I'm not going to give any context. I'll just read this. That phobia of the city, as if it were a vice of history, reservoir of history that stagnates its energy and corrupts its best hope, that hatred of the wall, the roof, and political volume, of cubic reason, that lack of trust in the urban economy, monetary economics, in the radial administration of the law, all of that has led him to cultivate a strange project, according to which civilization can only continue to develop by destroying the city, as if it were possible to speculate in philosophy without speculating in trade, as if both were not specifically political, condemned to be produced simultaneously in the same crucible of interests. He doesn't see that the leisure of poetry is not possible without the business of slavery, and that if the proportional and condensed imitation of nature leads to imitable art par excellence, then those same qualities lead to the amphitheater's inimitable spectacle. He wants to change the river's course, but how to change the course without interrupting it, and how to interrupt a course without losing all flow. Who dares to think to destroy all the world's cities in the name of an orbicular civilization? And all I can say is that Aliocha Coll was definitely seeing the future by looking at the past. This book is set in a kind of surrealist, dreamlike late antiquity, Attila and Rome and these kind of barbarian interactions with this peak civilization of the Roman Empire. But then it also gets out of that by dealing with the Buddhist influenced Chinese civilization of the post-Han Dynasty period, before the Tang Dynasty, is from what I can gather, in Luoyang. And so that, with my kind of world literature project, paired with my thoughts on ecology, where you will find people who say, like, the thing that went wrong is agriculture, and then agriculture allowed accumulation of people and resources in one place, which means a city is invented as a technology. And give or take a few thousand years, 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, that was the beginning of the end, because human population grew, the coverage of slave societies grew, the intensity of warfare grew, until now, where we are at the peak of warfare. The worst war in human history was in living memory, by far. It's not even close. We have the most slaves on Earth now than in any time in human history. We have killed the most, the largest proportion of other life forms on Earth now than ever in human, older than human history even, but just say human history. But we seem to have some kind of, idiotic view that we're the peak of progress, and this is the best anything's ever been. And I think that has to do with our lack of a coherent perspective on things. And I think, like Finnegan's Wake, that's what Aliocha Coll is attempting to correct in Attila. Maybe not ostensibly, maybe not as a political project, but as a work of art, as a work of the human spirit through wisdom is what he's trying to do. And so that's a bit of a taste of what I might talk about with my video. But anyway, I'm still working on it. Someone might snipe me and make a video before me, but whatever. So that's that. And I have two more books to talk about that are paired kind of in interesting ways. I would strongly recommend watching the video that Books You Haven't Read just put out. That's the name of the channel. It goes by Nate, his nom de plume, about the Odyssey. He just read the Odyssey in full for the first time, which is one of my plans for this summer. I think my reading project for this summer is going to be the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and then Death of Virgil. We'll see. Might not do that, but it sounds really enticing. So I'd like to think I will do that. And I plan on starting the Odyssey momentarily. But what I'm doing in the meantime is, let's see, I will start with this book, The Dope, The Real History of the Mexican Drug Trade. And I started reading this months ago and just finished it. And one of the things that kept me from working on it more, like reading it more, is I knew how it ended. I knew the story. He starts in the early 20th century, and it's a story of tyranny through violence and corruption. And it only gets worse and worse. And so it was like, maybe the idea would be kind of like, a train is about to crash and, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die. And all you can do is hear the screeching of the brakes of the train, and you can't look. So that's what it felt like, and I couldn't look. I couldn't read the book. I got to like 250 pages in, and that leads you up to like the mid 1970s. And I just couldn't read further. But a few days ago, I went ahead and finished it. And the things you find is that, you know, our current, however you want to describe it, humanitarian disaster, refugee crisis in the United States, with, you know, millions of people from Latin America fleeing violence, horrific violence and mistreatment and criminal behavior and imperial hegemonic domination by the United States. And they are fleeing to the United States with a hope of refuge and salvation, at least temporary. And then, of course, the you know, current evil, tyrannical, Nazi-esque government we have has the audacity to use these people as a scapegoat. You know, you'll learn your lesson. You know, you'll learn your lesson as this repeats history. And I can't go into total depth on this now because I also have another video planned that will include the following author, Cicero. Cicero, in this volume, the middle section is, so there's an introduction, and then part one is titled Against Tyranny. And it includes the attack on misgovernment against Verres, Cicero's life and letters, which really focuses on his involvement with Caesar, ostensibly. And then attack on an enemy of freedom, the second Philippic against Antony. And, you know, it is just insane how much this reverberates with the current period we're living in the United States right now. It's extremely disheartening, but it's disheartening knowing that we're repeating this so like cow-like and just, I can't think of a word that conveys my disgust. But reading this is also heartening to know that for 2,000 years, this work has been deemed valuable enough to keep alive. And to know that Cicero, for a variety of reasons, was fighting against what we have to fight against today. And so, like I said, I can't go into full depth here because, you know, basically every book here is, you know, a 20 to 30 minute video. So bear with me there. But I'm going to be pairing this with a work from the Chinese that I think is especially relevant. And I might whip up my own Philippic. So we'll see about that. I just don't want to go viral. At all costs, I don't want to go viral. So I'll have to make sure it's at least somewhat boring to guard against that eventuality. Yeah, it's a little bit of what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about, my bookish thoughts. And in addition to recording this video, I'm also going to have book haul part 2 paired with my recent book haul. So I've been trading in a bunch of books, and I've been getting fewer books out of that trading, but I'm getting things that I care more about. And I feel like I'm kind of at a parallel track where on this part of the track, I'm not in reality. You know, I'm collecting works on classical Arabic and, you know, what would you say, like, the biography of Du Fu and all this kind of thing. And then this other track, I am like imminently living in reality, as great literature does. It puts you in deeper contact with reality than anything but being fully aware of your place in the present, sensuously and in relationship with other people and other beings, and your exact time politically, sociologically, linguistically, culturally, historically, whatever. I think only great literature has the chance of rivaling that. And so that's one end, and then here's the parallel track where I'm like, I myself need a refuge from just the horror of it. So anyway, that'll have to be the end of this video, so that I can make my sharing my books that I've gotten recently. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on anything I said, let me know. If you're especially interested in my video that I could delve into more deeply any of these topics, I guess my thoughts on AI, Achilles Fang, my interest in Arabic culture, my thoughts on the current situation with Mexico and the United States, with the drug trade, the humanitarian disaster, the scapegoating of minority groups in the United States, Aliocha Coll and Attila, or Cicero paired with Wang Fu, Essays of a Recluse. I want to make full videos on each of those things, but those are all, of course, pretty substantial, and don't know if I have it in me to make all those videos, but we'll see. All right. Thank you for watching. Death is a Gang Boss.